This is Sizzle powered by Fit to Be Trained, coming to you from the Deep End Broadcasting Network studios here in the lovely Virginia Beach, Virginia, here in the United States of America. You can find this program on deependbroadcasting.com and subscribe to this network's YouTube channel, Deep End Broadcasting. Want to get on the 60-day transformation?
Oh,
Contact Sizzle on any of her social media platforms. Search Fit to Be Trained. Now, here's the host of Sizzle, Karen Sizzle Dougherty.
da, 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 da. I'm kind of nervous today.
Why is that?
Well, because we don't have a guest. And so I have to talk about myself, and I don't like that as much. You know what I mean?
Funner to talk to other people.
It is. It is more fun. I already know my story. I like hearing other people's stories.
But our audience doesn't know your whole story.
No, they don't. And I'm realizing that. And I was in a course just recently for like learning how to sell and stuff like that. Because as much as I'm a fitness trainer, I know how to pick weight up and put it down and coach and all that and write programs, but necessarily selling them, I didn't really know how to do. And a lot of it is, reaching out to others, networking, but a lot of it is being vulnerable and showing who you are and telling people who you are so you can attract, an audience that's like you, that relates to you. And, it goes both ways. So somebody might not want to work with me. And I because and what am I trying to say here? Like maybe the fit is better for some people than for others. And what I always like to say is even if I can't help someone, I know so many people in town and online that I can send them to somebody that can. Like I'm really confident that if you came to me looking for help, I'd be able to provide it for you or find you somebody that would. And so the reason why, like when you show your vulnerability, you go deeper and tell people really who you are. And I think a lot of people know that I'm in recovery for addiction to alcohol and drugs. So I got a little bit of experience in that field, and I do some work with that on some of my programming too. I just don't talk about it a lot because it tends to be something that we keep anonymous. You don't necessarily always have to be in the forefront. And, I'm in recovery for addiction. So I like to say that, like, I'm not an addict anymore. And could I potentially go back? Oh, yes. Like I say that laughing. So that's why we always say as a group in my world, we're in recovery. We're recovering. I'd like to say I'm in recovery, like it's past tense. It's in my past. And I quite frankly don't like talking about it all the time because I don't want to associate myself to those old behaviors, but I never want to forget where I came from. And I want people to know that if they're struggling, they can trust me. If they're struggling with anything. So I'm going to show my vulnerability for a hot second. And I might joke around during this stuff. So don't take offense. I get nervous sometimes. And sometimes laughter is the best medicine for something that you feel uncomfortable about. And talking about myself is one of them. But like a lot of these questions, I like to ask other, we have athletes on here. We have all kinds of guests and professionals in nutrition and wellness. And I love our guests. Like we've been knocking it out of the park when it comes to having people. And I have more coming. Like, don't give up, audience. But I didn't have anyone for tonight or today. So I wanted to go ahead and let you know who I am. So feel free to interject anytime, Steve. Okay. So one of my favorite questions.
I know your story.
I know. And this one goes into a little bit of detail, which is kind of nice, which is like there's going to be stuff that you don't know. Like, and I had a story that I did as a speech for the Salvation Army. They were graduating from their treatment, and I was asked to tell my story at the end, that the night that they were graduating. So what we do when we tell our story is try and tell people, who we are, and then build strength and hope to know that there is an end, if you want it, that you don't have to stay in the grips of addiction. And we had Tammy Saunders on here that worked for Barbell Saves for a long time. Now she has her own box in Iowa. She moved since the last time that you and
I saw that.
I know, it's really cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm sure she'll take some of that element to the new box. So that's kind of cool, that spreading, where recovering from alcohol and drugs, fitness really helps. It really, really helps. And I'll get going. I was born in New Jersey in 1966, and I was born in North Jersey. This is kind of cool. And I was adopted 5 weeks later to South Jersey. So born on both sides. I have an older brother who's 4 years older than me, that I adore, but we kind of grew up in a hectic household, should we say. It was tumultuous. Our parents were like, fighting all the time. And my parents are deceased now, so I don't feel like I'm bringing any disrespect to my family. And my parents did the best they could, I might add. And I think they were great parents, but we all know that some houses are more tumultuous than others. And it was the 70s. So me and my brother, we started partying to kind of escape, and it worked. It was kind of cool. I do need to mention that later my mother was diagnosed with mental illness. So we did grow up in a household where, because back then, again, I was born in 66, in the 70s when we were growing up. Mental illness was not something that was even really known about. They didn't talk about depression and bipolar and all that. So unfortunately, it went undiagnosed in a lot of families, and mine was one of them. But we got to party. It was the 70s. So I took my first drink when I was 12, and I immediately loved it. It was I just loved it. It totally relaxed me. It was great. It was the 70s. So LSD, PCP, Quaaludes, uppers, downers, anything you wanted was available. And by 13, I was well involved into that world. I loved it. And I was hanging out with a crowd that loved it too. So I wasn't alone.
Back when drugs were drugs and they stopped mixing drugs with other different drugs that were different drugs, calling them different drugs.
Right. I hear what you're saying, because I say it almost with a bit of pride. I mean, it's crazy. I joke around when the drugs were good. I'm from the 60s and 70s. The music was awesome. The drugs were good. The cars were badass. It was just a different time back then. And you're saying the drugs were more pure, which is true. I, unfortunately, because of this, I was running away. I was failing school, and I was getting in a lot of trouble. And I got entered into the detention centers and that system by the time I was age 14. So you can think back. That's a tumultuous time in life as it is. And then on top of all those personal problems, it was rough. And so foster care, detention centers, group homes. But I was lucky and put into treatment really quickly, because I grew up in New Jersey, like you heard, and Philly was like a stone's throw away. So there was a lot of treatment and stuff even for kids back then. So I got put in sleepover school. I always joke around, and it was slightly detention behavioral, but it was a great place in Northeast Philadelphia. It was called The Bridge, and it was for teenagers. And we all had, it was unlocked, and every single one of us would run away one time. but then you'd realize how good you had it. So I really need people to know, like, when kids go into the foster care system and detention, It is scary, and there is a lot of real stuff that happens in that world, but there's also good stories too. We hear about the bad. So there is help too. I don't want people to think it's a lost cause, because I have a success story with that. Um, I got a call, so it threw me off. Sorry. It took my notes away. So I was in a group home in Camden, New Jersey. That's pretty rough city. It's a pretty rough area. And I have some stories, but I won't bore you with that. But I had some stuff go down in my life there. And it was the first time, I had gone out and I was drinking and I was late for a curfew in this, it was a group home in Camden. So we were allowed out, but I'm a kid. I'm 13, 14-year-old girl in Camden. That's like, I look back now and I'm like, damn. And I was noticeable. It was mostly a Black community. I was the only white girl, as Irish as can be, but I got treated really well, I might add. It's almost like when you're in those kind of places, you adapt, and I don't know how to say it. I almost feel lucky that I'm from those realms, because I'm comfortable now, like around areas that other people might feel uncomfortable with because they've never been around it. The court placed me in the children's treatment facility in Philly, and that I was about 14. And I actually went to my first treatment center in North Jersey, Fair Oaks South, it was called. It was back, they didn't know what to do with kids at first in New Jersey, because we didn't have any kid treatment centers like Philly did. Because, now we're still in the 70s, though, mind you. So it's still a long time ago. But I went to Fair Oaks South, and I was the only kid in there. I was just a kid. So we would have to go into these groups. And it was the first time I ran into famous people, because we were close to New York, so there was some famous people in there. There's always famous people in treatment centers, if you think about it. Unfortunately, alcoholism and drug addiction is a way of coping for another mental illness, possibly, or, it's just an addiction that gets out of hand. It comes with a lot of shame, and it's kind of a shame that it does, because I think that's what keeps people in that place of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
You got to realize that there is a way out. And I was talking to a guy yesterday. It was really cool, because I do some coaching along with fitness training. I keep it more anonymous, but here I am on a podcast. You'll never hear me advertising for it, because you'll hear me advertise my fitness business. But I like to keep that side coaching a little bit more anonymous, so people can feel comfortable sharing, coming to me and knowing there is a lot of anonymity. And I've never been able to say that word.
Anonymity.
As much as I've been in Alcohols Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous through my life, you'd think I'd know how to say that word by now. Let me go back to my notes, because I get nervous, and perhaps I'm talking too much. The 80s came. Okay, so now the powder's coming in, meth and cocaine and all that stuff started coming in, and I loved it. Spent my 20s in addiction, legal troubles, DUIs, failed attempts at rehab. It was a tough time. I did go to college, though, and graduated, and I got out because I was a functioning addict. Like, I want you to know, you hear all this stuff, but I was still able to have jobs. I mean, I've worked since I was 16 years old. So I was just explaining to a guy yesterday, because I started to tell you and I jumped off subject. I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he was telling me how grief is such a big part of addiction that and I'd never heard this. I'm 59 years old. I've been an addict for a long time. I just told you, since I was 12, and never had that peace of how grief, and I mean peace like PIECE, that grief could be what you're covering up when you're using. And because I relapsed, like going further in my notes, I won't go there, but I relapsed, and we'll come back because I think it was because of grief. Like I've always wondered why I relapsed, but
Oh, no, when my mom was on her deathbed, it was easy to come take a shot or two or three or four or five or six just to get just to numb yourself to everything that was
the
happening.
agony, right? I know. And when my parents were ill, I was sober by then, so I know. But I did really addictive things. Like I smoked cigarettes. I'd leave my mom's house and smoke like a pack of Newports. I was a fitness trainer. I didn't care. I was just coping with grief any way that I knew how. And I remember my buddy, he was like, God, I can't believe I'm watching this. I was like, but, and then I stopped, it was like just a habit. Like I wanted to drink really bad or use drugs or something, and I couldn't. So I smoked cigarettes. It was the closest thing I could get at, It's weird. Like I still do stuff like that. My behavior, like I'll overeat. I'll do whatever, I try to curb that. I mean, I'm in health and wellness. So obviously, and if I can't, I usually go to a professional and go, holy smokes, we better get this under control. I'm getting ready and so I make sure I don't use alcohol or hard drugs again. Okay. So the 80s, I passed through there. I moved to Minnesota when I was 25, and, I completed trade school, became architectural drafter. I'm using during this time, but I was balancing addiction, work, relationships. My friends were getting married and all that, but I wasn't. I wasn't really marriage material. But I think the guy that I was supposed to marry, like if they send you somebody, like they say God or whoever, your soulmate shows up. But if you're drunk and high like I was, you might lose them. He might be like, I'm not sure I want to marry that girl, But we were friends. He was somebody but I didn't get to marry him. But
So that's what's happened.
yeah, like I've never been married, so I always wondered, now he's passed on. I'm always like, was Troy the one that got away? I've always thought that, and I've had some great boyfriends in my life. So every time I say that about Troy, I feel like, damn, I shouldn't say that because I wasn't always single. I'm single now, but I kind of want to be, so I'm not putting that out there for any invitations. I've had some of the best boyfriends there ever were. So it just didn't work out because of addiction. I wasn't a happy drunk. I was not very nice. I could get violent and stuff. And then finally I got sober when I was about 30 years old. I decided I wasn't going into my 30s. I wasn't going to, do a whole new time in my life using. It was stupid. So I went to treatment, got clean, 30 years old. Everything just turned to a pink cloud. I was confident. I was happy. I was energized. It was awesome. I built a successful life, and I need to know. Check this out. I built a successful life. I was a real estate investor. I opened up my own fitness business. So I want you to know that all during this time when I'm using, I'm working out. I started because here I grabbed somebody else's interview sheet. What led you to fitness? I was about 19 years old as when I started lifting weights and really getting into it. And a girlfriend of mine was working at a Nautilus gym, and Shelly Schaefer, shout out to her. I love you. I love you, Michelle. We're still really good friends, but she was working at a Nautilus gym, and we might have been, I say 19 and we might have been 17. She might correct me. We were young though. We'd just gotten out of school. And I got out at 17, but I thought maybe I was a little bit older. I can't remember. But anyway, she came out of she had been working out on these Nautilus machines, and she looked amazing. And both of us were already athletic through our lives. Like I was field hockey and all that. She was cheerleading, blah, 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 blah. And so we were friends from when we were really, really young in junior high. And then I went away to sleep over school. But I got out of that. I graduated, obviously, moved on, and I picked up my friendships where I'd left off. So I've always had really good, strong friendships. Anyway, that's how I got into lifting. She invited me. I got a job, not at that place, but I started teaching aerobics and got a job at Spa Lady. And that's how that, fitness played as a career from the time I was late teens, we should say. So I had opened up, when I got sober, I opened up my own business. I, believe it or not, worked part-time in bars because once I had gotten my poop in a group and I could be around alcohol and not drink it. I just made that decision. I was done. And I bought a Harley and I volunteered. I did a lot of volunteer work. I volunteered in detention centers. The Big Sister program was something that was very popular back then. And I think it's still around, but I would go into detention centers and talk to kids. And because, a lot of the boys get into selling and that kind of thing. And that's like learning, that's economics. Basically, I went to economics in college and I wanted these kids to know that there was hope because in the Minneapolis area and boys and girls, the girls were sadly, I was big sistering. Some of them were hooking that young. I mean, it was unbelievable. The children that were, so I wanted to open up a group home for a safe space in Minneapolis. And that started, it didn't work out, but I had started that. I was doing a lot of work in Meals on Wheels for AIDS patients because I had always felt like, because AIDS was big back then, a lot of people were getting sick. It was a big deal. And so I did volunteer with them because I always felt like, thank God I never got that. Like, even if I wasn't promiscuous, I was with men that were promiscuous. We were all into drugs and alcohol and woo. Sounds like a good time, but it wasn't. But as I was, in my sobriety, life looked great. Life was really, really, really great. And I was sober for 7 years. And even though life looked great from the outside, I still to this day look back and wonder what happened. But it says here, right here, this is from a speech that I had done a couple years back. I had major setbacks. I had a tumultuous relationship and a miscarriage. My group home plan had gotten denied. And I totaled my car before a dinner party that day. So it was like a lot of things were going on, big things, I might say, tumultuous relationship and a miscarriage. So my hormones, I still to this day think. And then my roof started leaking on my head. I was getting ready for the party. And that night, after all the guests left, I had a really big fancy dinner party. And after all the guests left, I drank. So my relapse back into descent. So after 7 years, I start drinking again and quickly got back into drugs, got pregnant, kept trying to go to treatment. I kept trying. I kept relapsing. It was terrible. The only when I was pregnant was the only time I could hold it together. Wow. I look at this stuff because I put it out of my head. I dated a drug dealer.
Now you're on such a good roll here with all this info.
I was. And then I relocated. I relocated here. So you guys got me. And and I'm glad that we can laugh, because it like I need people to know there is a way out of this shit. But excuse my mouth, but it can get dark, it does. It gets dark. And I want to skim over this because of time. I could talk to you all day about this stuff, and I don't mind talking about it. I really don't. I just keep a certain amount of anonymity for a reason, because it is personal and not everybody wants to hear about it. The people that are struggling do, but not others. I mean, unless they do, right? I dated a drug dealer, lots of violence and toxicity. So meanwhile, remember, I had gotten pregnant. Well, the baby's born now. So, raising a kid in that environment is not good. He was just a baby, but whenever that's kind of environment or negativity is around, even if the baby can't talk, I feel like they can sense it. It's not good. It's just not good, right? Mm. So meanwhile, I'm always trying to get sober, but I am not succeeding. I relocated here. So I moved here in 2007. And this is a little embarrassing because we all know I'm in relapse, but I'm a functioning addict. I can go to work every day. I really need to specify that because not all addicts are really noticeable, like I could go to work every day. I wasn't I wasn't crazy at work or anything. I mean, I was probably late. I was probably hungover, stuff like that. And I'm still friends with my bosses. They would probably be like, yeah, I was just really reliable and good at my job. So they kept me around. Um, it turned into full-blown addiction in 4 years. Um, I lost all my properties. Remember, I had 5 properties because I had moved here. And when I moved here, I was in addiction. So I'm not making good decisions. It's 2008, the crash.
Can you imagine having all those now?
Yeah, that was a crash. I know was the plan. That was the plan. Imagine I'd be selling them and we crashed in 2008. The real estate market did. And I could say in public so I wouldn't lose face, not faith, face, that's what happened to me because it happened to a lot of investors. They lost their stuff, but I didn't have bad loans. What made me lose it was that I relapsed and I was making bad decisions and it was all like that. If I be really honest, and I know that, and I know that for a fact. I lost all properties but one, and by now my son is 6, and he's witnessed too much. I needed to change, so I got clean finally again. So I was out there for 7 years. Moved to Virginia Beach. Got clean 2011. Went to an AA meeting. By then I'd been to treatment so many times. I just knew what I had to do, and that was quit. So September 8th, 2011 is my sober date. I put my son on the school bus and went.
Do you still go to AA meetings?
Great question. I do when somebody comes to me and they need assistance, in getting clean. They come to me and they're like, I think I got a problem.
So you'll go with them to the class?
Absolutely. And I'll go with them.
I've done that before, actually.
I'll go with them as long as they need me to go. And I introduce them to people. I know a lot of people around town that are in it, and I know people in the program. And so, yes, I do go. I do virtual stuff. There's other things now in 2025. AA and NA is not your only road.
And for those of you out there listening, if you've never been the one and you think you have things going bad now, like, I was complaining about a few things on the way over here to you, Karen, when we came to the studio. But it's very eye-opening, the problems you'll hear of other people. It kind of puts things into perspective for yourself. Okay, maybe I'm not that bad after all.
Right. And addiction is an ugly space. So somebody that's really can look good on the outside, especially because we talked about functioning addicts. And I joked around. I mean, I worked at Norfolk Yacht and Country Club, right? And I did really well there. I was successful but I know that my bosses knew I had a problem. Maybe the people that worked there didn't because you're just doing your job and blah, blah, blah. But maybe they did. We as addicts, we think nobody knows and everybody knows. It is part of the nature of the beast. It's part of denial, which would be a whole nother podcast. But first time getting clean. Okay. The first time getting clean, remember, I called it even a pink cloud. It was great. Everything was blissful. Everything was great. I was 30 years old, blah, 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 blah. I built my empire. And you'll hear all old timers in AA and NA tell you, don't go back out, because getting back in is really hard. And it was. But I want people to know that, I mean, I was trying to get help. Just keep trying to get help. Even if you don't succeed, don't give up. Keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. It took me 7 years the second time. Oh my God, it took me 7 years. And my first I was no pink clouds. It was so hard to stay clean. I had a little boy at that time. We would walk in the 7-Eleven and I would stare at the drinks, at the alcohol in the back. And my son would say to me, Mama, don't, you're just going to have to start over. And I was like, son, I won't. And every time I would get a chip in that first year, I'd give it to my kid, because I don't know if I would have been able to do it if I hadn't had a kid. It was so hard to get clean the second time. It sucked. Excuse my mouth. I'd moved here to Virginia Beach because I had this kid. I had no money. I'd lost everything. I was in this tumultuous relationship that I had to get out of. And so I moved here with nothing. And the reason people are like, why would you move to Virginia Beach? Well, the beach is free, and so is the woods. And so I moved down on the ocean front, and I rented this cool little shack. It's still there, but it's probably going to get knocked down here soon. Because me and my landlord, he's passed on. I would literally duct tape stuff together. So it was amongst the mansions, and the beach was on one side and the woods in the other. And that way my kid didn't know that we were in hard times. And the dude that rented to me was so cool, and he never raised the rent. He understood my situation, but I was clean. I stayed clean, and it was hard, but I stayed clean. And I went to meetings a lot. So in that first year, I highly recommend that you use AA, NA, and now there's so many programs that if you don't like AA and NA, you don't have to not have support. Get in contact with me. I can tell you a list of them. I can't even repeat them off the top of my head, because I did take a sober or recovery coaching. I wanted to get a certificate in that so I could help others and show some accolades in the recovery realm. And so I have a list of places and other things besides AA and NA I can help people with and guide to, if that's not their gig. If you're atheist, because NA and AA is there's a lot of spirituality in it. And sometimes if people are atheists, they don't really like that. They feel uncomfortable. So there's other ways. What's that saying? There's more ways than one to skin a cat, or whatever. Yeah. So there's so many ways to get sober now.
Too, like the conspiracist in me will also come out and say this. I don't think alcohol is the same as it was like 20 years ago.
Why do you say
I
that?
feel like it's different. I feel like there's something else in there
Really?
that makes it worse, like hangover wise, maybe brings you down. I don't know, kind of the conspiracist in me. But, and I know, I get it. The hangovers get worse the older that you get, they say. But the hangovers are nothing like they used to be back in the day.
That's
It's
interesting.
completely different. Back in the day, you'd be giddy, have a little bit of a headache, but you're still fine. You still function. It seems like nowadays, I mean, that it levels you, and it's just not me. It's anyone I talk to. If you go out and have a hard day of boozing, watching sports, or whatever the heck you're doing.
Well, everything's stronger.
Playing on the boat,
Like, think about
4th
it.
of July.
Everything's so much stronger now. Like, weed is like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You can smell
Well, that's
it.
true. That's very true.
I mean, everything is stronger. So I wouldn't be surprised, because I haven't drank in 13 years. So I don't know. I do know this. My girlfriends and a lot of my friends drink, like I hang out with people that drink, and I just don't want people to think that their life is shuts down if they decide to quit drinking, and that you have to just hole yourself up and you can only hang out with people that don't drink. That's not true. It's not true. It's not true. Come see me. A lot of people stop from, they're afraid to stop using, thinking their life will be so boring or something.
I think that almost instantly you get clarity after a few days.
I think so.
Yeah,
I mean,
you get a lot of clarity, I think, and you're like, this feels pretty good.
Mine's my
Get some exercise,
self-esteem. When I was in active addiction, I always felt so bad about myself, and I had a certain self-hatred and shame, and so I remember, like, I was working in a bar, like I said, in my 30s, like the first time I got sober, I was working in bars because I could be around I could be around it, and I didn't even want it. And addicts that were in active addiction would come to me and be like, how do you do it? And how do you do it? And I was like, my confidence is back. Like, I feel good about myself. I was just sick of the self-loathing. And I say that to addicts, and addicts know what I'm talking about. Like, if you're not in addiction, then yeah, might not know what self-loathing is. But we as addicts, we do. It sucks. You just hate yourself. It's hard to look in the mirror. It's just bleh. And so for me, quitting drugs and alcohol made it so I didn't have that anymore. So, and I could even be around it because I was like, you ain't getting my confidence, and back to fitness, like, I'm fit. I'm working out this whole time. I was just, even when I was in relapse, I worked out. So it's kind of funny. I started CrossFit when I was still using, like, thank God I didn't have a heart attack because I'm using hard drugs, cocaine. And, that was back when cocaine didn't have fentanyl in it. Yeah. I was like chugging. I would go to work hungover. One time I had to take a cab in. This is when I worked at the yacht club too. I should be more embarrassed than I am, but it was such a long time ago, and I've been sober for so long, and I did my job good. But one time I had to take a cab in, and my boss goes to me, "Why did you take a cab in? What's up with your car?" And I was like, I could still be drunk from last night. I didn't trust driving. I was like, because we'd stay up late. Fitness, you're in work by 6 a.m. So, and I was doing my own workouts too. And I don't mean to laugh about something that's serious, but I do feel kind of privileged that I got through that and that I actually did keep my fitness, which is probably attributes to some of my better health during a time of non-health. I don't know I think you know what I meant.
Yep.
But anyway, I had to go to jail. I had to go to jail for 2 weeks. I had to go to Bucks County Prison for 4 days for a charge. I was about 3-4 years sober at this time. And I was driving home from taking care of my mother before she passed away. And they picked me up in Maryland. I was speeding, and they picked me up for an old warrant I had. Because when I was in active addiction, when I was young, I was getting DUIs. Anyway, I had a DUI in Pennsylvania from 1989.
Wow.
I know. And Pennsylvania it's a Commonwealth. Pennsylvania had not forgiven me for that. And I had moved to Minnesota, and I would get pulled, for silly things or whatever. And cops would tell me, you've got a warrant out of Pennsylvania. And back then I'd have to sit there and wait, for them to get a call that it was just, they didn't want me. It was a DUI that I had ran from or whatever. And they weren't going to, what's that word, extradite from Minnesota. But anyway, they were willing to extradite from Maryland. So they got me. I forgot all about it. Had been years before. And even the cop was like, 1989, you got a warrant. He's like, oh my God. He goes, they want you. So I was about in my 40s. I had my son in the car. We were coming back from taking care of my mom. Like I said, I had a friend come and get him. Thank God. And oddly enough, my friend had a problem too with alcohol and drugs. And thank God he was sober that day. Like, God is good, It was, so he came and got my son, and it was just God willing. It was just great how that that happened. But anyway, so I get hauled off to jail, and I'm in jail in Maryland, and Pensy wants me, but we got to wait for Pensy to come get me. So that was experience. Like, I got to help other addicts, like young girls, because we all know jail is a young girl's sport. And then I met this one girl that was my age that we connected after, outside of that time. But anyway, it was a great experience. I got to help others because, like I said, I'd been clean for 4 years at that time, the second time. So addicts trust me. They know they can talk to me. They know there's no judgment. Inmates and whoever. I've been there. So they finally came and got me from Pensy, and I went to Bucks County Prison, went in front of the judge, and she sentenced me. And I was like, holy God. She sentenced me for not, and I kept, anyway, to make a long story short, the attorney was talking to me, and he said, you're going to have to come back. I forget how she just didn't let me go. She didn't sentence me that day, but I was coming back for sentencing. Like, I wasn't getting off, and we were all shocked. We couldn't believe it. And so anyway, the attorney's whispering to me, and I said, I'm okay, sir. I've been clean now for 3 years. I can handle this. I'll get whatever she needs and come back. Or I can get the pay. I can't remember if they were holding me. I just remember pooping my pants. Anyway, she overheard me say that. And I failed to mention that when I was in Bucks County Prison, I was in there with all these young girls. They looked like prom queens, and they had tracks up and down their arms for shooting dope on a Kensington. And you hear about Philly and how hardcore Philly is with drugs, and it's true. And addiction doesn't care where you're from, and so I was in front of this judge, and they called her the Dragon Lady because she locked everyone up. And she overheard me say to this attorney, who was a public defender, wasn't an attorney that I had or anything, and she heard me say, I've been sober for 3 years. I'll be able to handle this. I'll get paperwork or anything she needs. She overheard me, and she turns around and she goes, Miss Dougherty, because that's how they say my name. What did you say? And I said, I've been sober for 3 years. God, I could cry. This was hardcore. I've been sober for 3 years, ma'am. I can handle whatever you need and get you any kind of paperwork that you need. And she goes to me, tell me a nice story. I never get to hear nice stories anymore. And she was a judge that they called the Dragon Lady, remember, because she locked everyone up because she saw these girls looked like prom queens. I said, ma'am, I know what you're dealing with inside your prison. And she goes, did you see them? And I said, yes, I see them. She goes, I lock them all up to protect them so their parents can sleep at night. And I got to tell her that I had been clean for 4 years for the second time, and actually that most of my life I had been clean. I had had a small relapse stint, that my son was thriving, and that I had a business. And because she, like I said, she wanted to hear that story. She said, tell me a good story. She knocked her gavel down and she said, you'll be out of here by Easter. Easter was coming. So she released me. Because like I said, they were holding me till my next case. I think that's what was going to happen, because she said, you're going to be home by Easter. And I didn't think I was going to be. So there that is. So I have experienced that in sobriety. So like I said, my story in sobriety the second time was not pink clouds. It wasn't opening business, working in a bar, having a good time, investing in properties. It's been a struggle, one after the other. Then my parents got sick and I had to deal with big girl problems. And And that's how it is, and I'm so grateful I was clean during that time because I could handle things. Like, I was my mother's executor, so I had to handle all the finances for the family, and so all that kind of stuff. I'm so grateful I was clean and sober for that, because I wouldn't have, I would have, it would have been so much harder. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have been able to do it, but life is so freaking hard when you're in active addiction, because it's like a third job. Like, you've got to keep it going, keep your other life, like work, or for me, being mother is a job, family, running the household, and keep your addiction alive. I mean, it's such a pain in the tail end. I don't miss it one freaking bit. And sorry to get so serious there, but it's just kind of like, that's how it was. But we're getting on time, so let me look at my notes. And uh like I guess that's what we're in: final reflections and lessons. Life and sobriety isn't always easy. You face heartbreak, setbacks, injustice. You definitely, injustice is no matter what, that it's.
Oh yeah, there's something out there not giving you justice.
But that's part of life. But I got justice. I did. Like that. Think of that judge that let me go. I had to come into Virginia, and I had to have that blow thing. You know how you go in the car?
Yeah.
I had to have that for 6 months. I actually couldn't even do that. I remember riding my bike to work every day, and everybody thought, because I was a fitness trainer. And that's when I met Lou. That's when I went to Valiant CrossFit, and I wrote to Lou. I was like, I need help on my lifts. And something came up, like, I don't drive, because I did have some punishment, even though that judge let me go. I mean, DMV, if you get in trouble with any kind of old DUI, new DUI, whatever, your judge can I don't know what happens nowadays, but because even this was a while ago, I think you get mandatory stuff. But DMV has more power than a judge. People don't know that. Like, if DMV tells you lost your license, but the judge says judge doesn't take your license, it doesn't matter. DMV has more power. I found that out during that time. And everything's harder when you're addicted. Yeah. So my story, and fitness during this time, it boosts your endurance, it's confidence. Like, it helped me stay clean. That's why CrossFit was really good for me for getting clean. Thank God I started it right before I got sober, so I knew about it. And then when I moved to the beach, there wasn't one yet. And then I found one, and I've been doing it ever since. I'll be 14 years sober this year. Fitness helped me. When I was broke, I had to clean the bathrooms at the CrossFit gym down at North End and mop the floors for my membership. So I always joke around when people are like, I can't afford fitness. I'm like, you can. You got to figure it out, and I've made so many amazing friends. But mind shifts, that recovery, don't get stuck in the would have, should have, could have. So I think what I'm trying to say here is, I must have been at my speech, where I'm like, final reflections and lessons. Sorry. Yeah, because you always, what I'm trying to do is give you the story, the strength, and fitness helped me stay, and then hope. There's always hope. My life right now, even though I went through those hard times, like in the beginning of getting sober, and probably the first 10 years, and those of you that know me, the last 5 years have been very, very difficult because of my family issues. So it hasn't been easy, whether it be my parents were aging and I had to take care of my parents, and then finally losing them. We all go through that in life. And let me mention something there: grief. When I talked to this dude yesterday, it was just so wild how he was like, grief is such a big part of not relapse, of addiction, and it's also a big part of recovery. So focusing on that grief, and I was like, man, that's so true. So a lot of a lot of people that are in using are doing it to cover something up. And sometimes it's mental illness. Sometimes it's just freaking science. You know, the person has bipolar and they're like, what the hell's wrong with me? And they're just using to try and feel normal, or schizophrenia or depression, you know, big stuff like that. And then there's, not that grief is small, but there's stuff that we all go through. And I was like, oh my God, when he said that yesterday, he was an attorney too. We were, but he does some work in these kind of realms. And I was talking to him about my recovery program. And when he brought that up, I was like, oh my God, I got to read this book. And then there's one of my guests that's coming in the near future wants to talk about grief and how fitness helped her. And so when I kept hearing that word, I was just gobstopped, for the lack of better words, like, oh my God, this is a major piece that I want to look at. Because when we were in treatment, I don't remember that ever being taught to us. And granted, it's been a long time since I've been there. This might be new. But mindset is everything, you know, mindset, recovery, wisdom. If you fall, stand back up. Don't think of the all or nothing thing. You know, if you relapse, don't wait 7 years to go back, you know, stand back up, try and get help right away. There's all different kinds of help now. And having mental toughness and resilience is part of addiction. People that are addicts have mental toughness and resilience, whether you're in or whether you're out. Nobody will ever tell me any different. And I think the reason why I'm so good at fitness and coaching and stuff like that, especially with nutrition, is I get people that are food addicts through my career for the last 30 some years. And I really think they trust me because they know I know what it feels like to have self-loathing and shame. It doesn't matter what addiction you got. That one's a hard piece. So I thought that's what I was covering, but grief might be some of it. That'll be another podcast, but I'm not going to bore. And I didn't mean to say bore. I'm not going to keep talking anymore. That was a good, I think I'm almost up on an hour. So I appreciate you all letting me tell you who I am and why I chose this career and why it's good for me and why I learn every day. So I learn from my clients and they learn from me. And this is, you know, you never can forget where you come from. And, you know, that's why it was kind of cool for me to go through this, you know, because I don't want to forget where I came from, but I also don't want to focus it all the time, because you want to move through your problems, you know, you want to move through your grief, you want to move through things, you know, and not keep dwelling on it, you know, that I don't think is healthy either. So this was good for me. It's been a long time since I remembered that the dragon lady from prison, and, you know, and I was only there for a short time, but I can say I've been to prison, and it was, how do I say this? It was actually pretty nice. And it was in Bucks County. And because I've been in some crappy jails in my youth and in my life, and for short stints for the drinking and driving stuff. But anyway, it was Bucks County, so that's outside of Philly, and it's a very nice area. But oh my God, the food! Whoever was cooking in that prison, it smelled like an Italian restaurant. I was like, oh, I'll never forget that. And I never want to speak highly of prison. Prison isn't. There's nothing good about it, right? You know. But I remember thinking, wow, that smells good. That's so silly. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I know my boundaries, like what I think is funny, but that's another thing too. Like, granted, Steve, you haven't had some of these problems. So that's what's cool about going into those rooms. Like you said, you hear people's problems. You learn to laugh about stuff that's dark. Like, I've always wanted to write a book about some of these deep problems that I've had resilience and gotten up against and won. I feel like I've beaten them. But how funny it is when you're around other people that have the same stuff. Like laughter definitely is the best medicine. And when you're in those meetings, like the stories that you hear are like, oh my goodness, or I can top that or not. But there is strength and hope after, so I really want people to focus on that. And if you're struggling, I want you to reach out to me any way you can. And like Fit to Be Trained is all over the internet. You can always private message me. And thank you for letting me take this time and your time to be vulnerable.
Oh, good stuff, Sizzle.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And I don't know what to end with.
Oh, I was we'll play your happy song, but
yeah, because I am happy. Like I felt like weird. Like, should we do that? Oh, what a night.
Good stuff. If you tuned in late, you can go to the beginning and get the replay as soon as this program ends.
Oh, really? What are you posting it right away?
Yep.
Damn. So I have no idea.
We were live. This is your first live program.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah. I didn't tell you that part to make you nervous.
Well, I'm glad because I might have told you to pull it. Like now I have no choice.
No.
That's cool. I'm so glad you did it.
We had to keep up with the 12:30 start time on Wednesdays.
Fair enough. Was I live the whole time?
Yep.
Damn. Okay, cool.
All right,
Thanks,
back to
man.
the guest next week.
Yes, we do. We have guests next week. Thank God.
Have a good week, everybody.
All right, bye.